When you defend the war on terror, I think it's the right thing to do. Mehdi's already mentioned, former head of MI5 said, became a recruiting sergeant for terrorists, particularly the invasion of Iraq. Michael Schur, the ex-CIA member who was tasked with finding Osama bin Laden, said, "We moved Al-Qaeda on from being a man and a group to being a philosophy and a movement." Did the war on terror create a war on terror?
I don't think so. First of all, I think you have to separate Afghanistan and Iraq. Afghanistan, there was no real credible alternative to getting involved, dismantling the terrorist training camps that were based in Afghanistan. Al-Qaeda weren't going to do this if we asked nicely. It had to be a military response. We had to go in there.
Is Afghanistan a safer place as a result?
Well, it certainly has less Al-Qaeda training camps. There was none of the elite training camps that were used to
far more violence now, Robin.
9/11. Well, it's a country that's being attacked by suicide bombers who are trying to hold back the forces of democracy, the things that people voted for in the Afghan elections.
Cameron admitted on Friday we've lost our moral high ground.
To Iraq, which if we go from the basis and say that Iraq was partially radicalised certain sections, which I think is true, what then is the alternative? If you assess in 2003 that your best strategy from a foreign policy and national security point of view is to invade Iraq, take care of Saddam Hussein, do you then not act because there's the fear that it may partially radicalise a minority of a minority? That's essentially having your foreign policy being held to hostage by domestic opinion, which you can't do. This is the reason we elect leaders, to take these kind of decisions. They're not beholden in this way to have to make every decision absolutely popular with every section of the...
How did the invasion of Iraq further the purposes of the war on terror?
Well, the invasion of Iraq was taken from the view that Saddam Hussein had chemical and biological weapons and the fear that he would then pass them on to groups such as Al-Qaeda. The threat perception had entirely shifted, and regimes that were seen as maybe containable and acceptable before, all of a sudden were not.
Well, Major General...
There have been tens of thousands of suicide bombers in Iraq thanks to our disastrous invasion.
Two really important points on this. This ideology didn't begin on 9/11. The 1990s, young Brits were fighting in the likes of Chechnya, Kashmir, Afghanistan, Bosnia. This isn't something that was created by us on 9/11. Secondly, the war on terror...
Those jihadists were encouraged by us, Robin, as you know.
This phrase, the war on terror, that everyone is criticised of, actually British and American governments haven't even used this phrase for 5 years. If it was solely this that was creating all the terrorists, it was just some kind of civil service...
Come on, just about the phrase.
Let Robin finish the point.
Then we can overstate the impact that we're having on this. This ideology has a movement that is independent of us. We can do things to change, and maybe some of our foreign policy decisions somewhat aggravate. But the idea that it would disappear if we just removed our troops from certain lands and put up the barriers and just stayed at home is bizarre.
No, okay, well, Robin, as you listen to that discussion, what struck you?
Well, what strikes me is the fact that if Britain was the place which everyone suggested it was, that there would be thousands upon thousands of Muslims leaving. I don't believe Britain is that kind of place. I think it's an overwhelmingly tolerant, liberal, democratic place where freedom of religion is entirely respected, as it should be. And so I just don't see this picture that Ajman is portraying.